taking up item number 17, housing proposal, Windview Heights, continuation public hearing from our December meeting. Mr. Murphy, thanks for being here. Mr. Litchfield, thank you for being here. I just want to remind everybody that we are discussing concept, and we are talking about whether or not it's good for the community. I don't want to mire tonight's conversation in zoning logistics. So please keep that in mind as we move forward. Mr. Murphy, since the last time you were here, is there anything new you want to add to our discussion?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that I would add is that after the last meeting, we were requested to give the board one more meeting in public hearing because the Housing Authority had not had a chance to, not the Housing Authority, Housing Partnership had not had a chance to review it. We did appear before them on December 20th via a WebEx meeting. My client, Gary Litchfield, who's here tonight, and Jack Hussey were both on the call, so we did spend some time with the members of that committee. I think we answered whatever questions they had of us, and haven't heard back since then. But so that's the only thing I have to report, is that we did meet with the Housing Partnership and discuss the matter with them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start with anyone from a board or a committee who wants to weigh in on this in a more formal matter. We'll start there. If anyone from Housing Partnership is here, and I see Brenda and Jess, and I saw Barbara earlier from Planning. I see Larry Cohen from Conservation raising his hand. So just want to get everyone's the board committee feedback first, and then we'll roll into any other public comments.
Try to keep everyone to about 2 minutes because there's a lot of folks here tonight. So just keep that in mind as we get to speak. So Larry's hand went up first. So if you could take him off mute, we'll throw it to Conservation.
All right, can you hear me?
We can, Larry. Go ahead.
All right, my name is Larry Cohen. I'm chair of the Burlington Conservation Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Good evening, members of the Select Board. The proposed Windview Heights project would be with a topography with steep elevations and low-lying wetlands to the west on the Little Brook Conservation Area. It appears that the steep grades range in elevation from 127 to maybe in excess of 200. The wetlands to the west are located in the conservation area and appear to be greater than 100 feet from the proposed development. I do not know if there are perennial streams in the project area, so my comments are based on the assumption that there is no state jurisdictional resource area that would require a hearing in front of the Conservation Commission. My understanding is that the Zoning Board of Appeals comprehensive permit allows for the solicitation of non-binding comments from the commission. So I have some related concerns to share with you. Steep sloping land suffers from erosion when their vegetative cover is disturbed or removed, and you then have bare soil. When the intense rain falls on steep slopes, water rushes down the slopes and causes flash flooding, washouts, and water pollution. It is therefore important to prevent water from rushing down in uncontrolled flows. The stormwater runoff must be contained or infiltrated during construction and after construction, so there is no flood damage to homes and properties down below. For this circumstance, I recommend that if this select board chooses to attach a letter of support to this project, that this select board should write a qualified letter of support with 3 basic conditions. They are, number 1, emphasize the importance of technical review by conservation staff of stormwater handling, erosion control, water quality, and peak rate of runoff, and convey the results to the Zoning Board of Appeals. For example, on a site with such steep grades, what comes to my mind, a strong item, is that you would want a project design that minimizes tree cutting in a site like this. Mature trees transpire large volumes of water from the trees, from the roots to the small pores to the underside of the leaves, and releases that water into the air. Number 2, ask the Zoning Board of Appeals to solicit permit conditions from conservation staff that should be included in the Zoning Board of Appeals comprehensive permit. And finally, number 3, ask the Zoning Board of Appeals to require an independent peer review of drainage, erosion control, sedimentation control, and stormwater handling under authority of Burlington Bylaw Article 14. In the past, when the Conservation Commission has required peer reviews of stormwater drainage and erosion control for complicated sites, It is common to see that the design substantially improved by implementing best stormwater management practices. So if the zoning board of appeals follows these 3 items, then the chances are better that flooding, severe erosion, and a multitude of complaints from residents in the area could possibly be minimized or avoided during and after construction. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you,
time.
Larry. Appreciate your time, Larry. Thank you. Okay, Brenda from the planning board. Get you unmuted.
Thank you, Chair Priest. Brenda Rappaport, Chair of the Planning Board. The Planning Board feels that, the Zoning Board of Appeals could use some assistance in administering this matter. We have offered staff, and, we'd be happy to form a subcommittee to join the ZBA efforts in making sure that this project is the best that it could be. We have received several concerns from neighbors blasting, several concerns about elevation, as Chair Cohen had stated. I think we're adding more affordable housing in kind of a difficult area when we don't really need it. I would proceed with caution on this project. And while I don't, I would like to see more planning board involvement in this project if it is to move forward. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody from Housing Partnership? No? Okay. Any other boards or committees with representation here this evening that would like to speak? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and open it to the public. Let's go ahead and raise your hand and we'll start calling on folks. 2 minutes on the clock for anyone who'd like to come up and speak. Yes. Sarah, come on down.
Hi, guys.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah Cawley from Sunnyside Ave, Town Meeting Member Precinct 7, where this project is going to be proposed. I'm here tonight asking the Select Board to rescind their letter of support for this project. I recognize the benefits of adding more housing options in town, especially for our senior residents, but the concerns and issues being raised by residents far outweigh those benefits. I won't address every issue, I'll just highlight a few. First, in your original letter of support, you stated that one of the benefits of this project would be, quote, the development of a site in a setting identified by the town as appropriate for higher density residential development and served by existing infrastructure, end quote. There have been many questions already raised about whether this area is appropriate for a 24-unit condo development, but apart from that, how is creating an entirely new road considered served by existing infrastructure? That is literally creating new infrastructure in an area that can barely support it. Second, the lot directly abuts Littlebrook, our second largest area of conservation land, on one of the highest elevation points in town, on a large area of solid ledge. The construction, blasting, and removal of trees and complex root systems would greatly increase stormwater runoff, especially with the addition of a steep and windy access road to the plan. Residents down the hill on Mountain Road would be affected, as well as the wetlands, hiking trails, and wildlife in the conservation area. Last, I have concerns with the application process. In applying for a 40B, it bypasses many regulations in place that would ensure this is the right thing for our community and that things are done the right way. The Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, the Board of Health are all in place to provide oversight and look out for the best interest of the town. Bypassing their formal participation and going straight to ZBA would be to the detriment of the community. It seems to me, with the number of iterations this project has gone through and the pushback it has already received, the 40B is an effort to ram this development into an area where it doesn't belong by avoiding some of the more scrupulous aspects of the process. I hope the board hears the valid concerns of existing residents and does not support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Just as a reminder, folks, we cannot issue a letter of support. This will still go to the state and could still be approved. So I just want to clarify that like our letter, if we choose to do nothing, would not stop this application from at least reaching the state. Okay, at which point, if approved, would still go to the ZBA. Just again, it's like my clarification. I see Brenda, Ms. Rappaport online. We can get you back off mute.
Thank you, Chair Priest. I just wanted, to your point, the application can still proceed, but if with the letter of support from the select board offers a higher chance of approval than not. Because the select board is saying that this is a benefit to the community, as opposed to you saying nothing at all and letting the state handle that decision. That's all.
I
Thank you.
understand that. I just, and thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to be clear that, you know, by us not issuing a letter wouldn't grind this whole thing to a halt.
Right, but if you did,
Rightly
if you
said.
did send a letter, it offers the state your support or the select board support specifically, and therefore they think everything is kosher and everyone's on the same page, and that is not necessarily the case. So I just want to make sure everybody sees both sides to that. That's all. Thank you.
No, thank you. All right, anybody else? Sherry, come on down.
Thank you, members of the board. Sherry Ellis, for the record, town meeting member and resident of the town, 3 Hickory Lane. I'm still concerned about this specific proposal at this specific location. At last select board meeting, I asked the proponent if they had intended to revise the 2019 application, particularly because that information was outdated and in some cases no longer correct. And if I understand correctly, town council also recommended that, you know, the application should, if the select board members are going to sign on to that, should really be updated. And if I'm understanding correctly, that application has not been revised or updated. In the original approval letter from the DHCD dated May 20, there is specific language that indicates that any changes made to certain numbers of things, one of them including the site plan, must be approved by the DHCD. And I don't know if the board has received any written confirmation from the DHCD that this has been approved again by them or not. In addition, the approval letter also noted that without a comprehensive permit issued, the approval letter would expire 2 years after that date, which was May 20th, 2020. So the approval letter from the DHCD, if I read it correctly, has expired. So to me, this further indicates that this application should really go back and be updated and revised. And with that, I would hope that if you members choose to support this, you would support it with all the correct information that's updated. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Lisa, go ahead.
Just for the board's information, this actually a new process, right? So the application is actually your application, so you can insist that it's correct. It would be your cover letter. It still has to go back to DHCD. They have to issue their new approval, and then it will be a new application to the Board of Appeals. So I don't think that there's any question. That's why the applicant's here. They know they have to get an updated letter from DHCD.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Zi Wang, town meeting member and also member of Land Use Committee. Last time, I have 2 concerns, basically. Last time I asked how many trees will be removed, and I don't know whether there's any update on that. And so I drove to the area during the New Year break, and I went to I think that's Richardson Road in the back of the originally proposed access. And it looks like will be a minimum 50 trees or even more, close to maybe even 100, just estimated. I think if that many trees that are removed, I agree with Larry Cohen that it will affect the air quality and groundwater and stormwater runoff. It would probably impact the neighbors down the hill or in the area. So I think we really need to take that into consideration. And he said that, and also I think Mountain Street or Road. So that's fairly flat. then it had this like sudden elevation to the project. Even we have the zigzag road to the, the project. I think that will be a future, like a high maintenance place. You want to keep the road really dry. Because when I go down the road, just how steep the road is a little bit scary, and just imagine it's like slippery day, even like the last storm we had with like a half-inch slush on the road. It's very dangerous. I honestly probably don't really want to leave there to go down the hill like that all the time. So the town will need to make sure the road dries all the time. Otherwise, I think it's going for accident to happen. So just my two concerns here. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeke. Yeah, I guess a point of clarification I should have mentioned earlier, we were informed after our last meeting that the grade of this would be roughly 8-degree grade, which in comparison, Harriet Ave is a 14-degree grade. So, when you imagine driving up Harriet along Sullivan Funeral Home side, this would be, sorry, apparently I'm not speaking loud enough tonight, which is a first for me. So what we were told was that that Harriet Ave is roughly a 14-degree grade going up the Sullivan Funeral Home side, and that this would be roughly an 8-degree grade. So you're talking about just over half of what Harriet's incline would be over that space.
Could Harriet be built today?
I'm sorry, Sherry?
Could Harriet Road be built today, today's standards? No.
I think that's why it's only an 8-degree grade versus a 14-degree grade, right? They're not proposing a 14-degree grade. Sorry, I keep dropping these in and not letting folks speak. Anybody else want to come up? Mr. Kelly. And for the public's information, Mr. Kelly sent us a letter today that we did have the opportunity to read through. Mr. Kelly, thank you for taking the time to put that together for us.
My kids keep.
I think I know why. I haven't heard half of what's going on. Jack Kelly, 14 Oxbow Lane, town meeting member, precinct 7, where this is located. I don't want to repeat my 4-page tome. You wouldn't give me the time anyway. But I'm the target audience for this. I'm over 55. I'm a single adult living in a home where my wife and I raised our 3 kids, and I want to stay in Burlington. No way would I ever move into that particular complex with that access. I just see it as not safe. Elderly people are going to be more likely to need an ambulance, and that's just a risk to both them and our emergency service people. And I think you've already covered the part that this is a new process. And I think you do have the right to dig into the nitty-gritty of this process and not kick this all down to the Board of Appeals. It could save everybody a lot of time if, as you dig into these details, you find that it's not an appropriate site. There's no question that we need senior housing. There's no question we need affordable senior housing. It's just a problem at this location. I would ask, since the housing partnership doesn't meet until tomorrow, and I understand they do have something to say about it, that you hold the public hearing open, because you can't, as I understand it, take new information once you close the public hearing, and they may have information that's valuable to you. Also, if you do ask the applicant for more information and more details, you wouldn't be able to entertain it if you close the public hearing. So I hope you will keep the public hearing open so you can get that information, use it, and possibly, if you agree that it is inappropriate, to avoid putting the Board of Appeal in the town through a long, difficult process. The point about the grade, I think, of Harriet Ave, that little part past Sullivan's Funeral Home, we wouldn't be able to build that road today. So I don't think we should compound a past error as justification for a steep, difficult approach to this particular process. One update is, in my letter, I indicated that I didn't know what the condo fee process would be for the affordable units. I heard today from a pretty authoritative source that that can be one of the significant problems for an affordable unit if they have, that they are not generally exempt from a lower assessment on the condo fees. And it frequently happens that an affordable unit person who doesn't have deep savings, if there is a major assessment, say a roof or something like that, it creates a problem and they have to then sell because they can't meet the assessment. And then it becomes very difficult for them to sell it because they have to sell it to somebody else in the affordable category. They can't increase or sell it at market rate. And that makes it difficult to sell. So they may be stuck with it and could find themselves in bankruptcy. And I don't think we want to put any of our seniors at that risk. Other than that, I'll give you the time to read my letter.
Which I did earlier today. Thank you for taking the time to put it together. Who else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Brett, and I have lived for the past 9 years with my family on Mountain Road, 425 feet from the proposed site of development. On behalf of myself and my family, I would like to add our perspective on why you should vote against providing your letter of support, because the proposed development is not in the collective interest of Burlington. And to that end, I have 2 main points. The first is that large condo complexes are not the type of housing that is of most critical need in Burlington, and the housing options in Burlington have changed since your prior vote. As per the 2022 Burlington Housing Needs Assessment, the proportion of Burlington's housing that exists as multifamily housing, defined as 20-plus units, is the highest percentage among all context communities and above the Massachusetts average. Moreover, we have existing options for 55-plus communities, as well as 7 affordable housing apartment rental complexes. This is not including the 167-unit apartment complex being built now in Northwest Park's 4th Avenue, which includes 23 units designated as affordable units for seniors. Moreover, although the proposed Windview Heights development includes 24 units, only 6 units would be created for this project that would be affordable housing, and this will not in a significant way contribute constructively to our housing needs. My second point is that the location of this proposed development will be highly detrimental to the safety of residents and property, town open space, and wildlife, and forever negatively alter the environment currently on Mountain Road. Although some of these details, as you pointed out, would be more thoroughly vetted during the Board of Appeals process, should this proceed to that point, I feel the Select Board needs to holistically consider the impact of what is being proposed now, where the site is located, and what is unique about that area of Burlington. To be clear, the access point change to now be located on Mountain Road significantly adds to this negative impact. Although not explicitly depicted in the drawings, 35 Mountain Road sits just after a blind curve when you're coming from Wind Street, creating an even more hazardous stretch of Mountain Road with this development on top of a steep hill of Mountain View Way. The safety of the many residents who walk, run, bike around Mountain Road would be impacted. Furthermore, as pointed out by fellow residents during the construction phase of this project, the likely blasting to be required would be dangerous to all living nearby, not just for traffic, but also with the destabilization of large trees in the area just behind these houses, which have already been known to fall on or near houses just in the high wind storms we had last month. As we all know, this proposed location is immediately adjacent to the Overlook Park and the Littlebrook Conservation Area, and this will have an extreme negative impact on that open space. I live just near the walking path entrance to the conservation open space, so I know how many people come, park, and enjoy that space. Therefore, this impact will not just be felt by residents on Mountain, but will be for all residents who normally would utilize this area of forest for fitness and recreation, as well as, of course, the many wild animals that currently live in this area. So for those that live near and adjacent to the proposed site development, we know the dynamic of this part of our community now. This is a quiet corner of Burlington. It's a dead-end street, and many people are walking and biking despite much of the street not having sidewalks. And it was actually this unique aspect of Mountain Road that brought my family to Burlington in the first place, and it's essential to our desire to continue to remain Burlington residents. I ask the board that you vote to not provide a letter of support for the proposed condominium project. This is not the same project that was brought to you years before, and Burlington has changed in that time as well. The potential to gain only 6 additional affordable housing units for seniors does not outweigh the extreme negative impact that this will have on open space utilized by the entire town and the safety of existing houses and residents in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeBona, I know that you're here, you're on the ZBA. Any word from you? I know you don't speak for the entirety of your board, but.
How's everyone doing? Jeff DeBona. Yeah, I can't speak for the board, but what I can say is anytime we have something before us, we always give everyone ample opportunity to express their opinion. We listen, and if it does come forward to us, we'll be open to listen to what anyone has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I saw a hand in the back there. Come on down.
Hi, everyone. I'll be short. I know it's getting late and we're all saying the same stuff, but I've lived here for 50 years. My name's Carrie Riley. I live off of Mountain Road, and I just think from a 10,000-foot level, this just looks bad. It was voted down for the Richardson Road area that's much more accessible. Mountain Road, off the top of my head, is a high-speed, double yellow line, 3-way stop sign, no traffic lights at the end of the road. Very dangerous. I have teenage daughters that drive down the road every day I drive down. It's dangerous as it is. It's one of the worst roads in town. Doing this is an absolute nightmare. It'll be like Lombard Street in San Francisco. It's disguised as affordable housing, but it's just a money grab. We don't need it here. And I just wanted to say that. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Anybody else? I see a hand in the back. Come on down, and then, Ms. Cohen, I see that your hand is up online. We'll come to you next, promise.
Good evening. Ron Riley, also reside at 7 Oxbow Lane for the last 4 years, and longtime Burlington resident dating back to 1976. Again, a lot of the justification for why I would oppose this and would request that the board not provide any support has already been mentioned, so I will not reiterate it. But what I would like to amplify is the traffic and safety concern on Mountain Road. I would contend, as it is right now, the road and the infrastructure is not adequate for the traffic that is there currently. Without the addition of increased residents and deliveries and guests that would be traveling and associated with those additional residents. Even in this time of increased telework and a surge in remote work, at any given time, if you were to travel down Mountain Road where it intersects with Wynn Street, you could be 10, 12, 15 cars deep at the stop sign. I would go as far as to say there's probably another intersection, there is not another intersection in town without a traffic light that probably sees that much congestion. I don't think that this is in the best interest of Burlington. I believe that the traffic is actually even compounded when the blinking yellow light in front of the funeral home actually has to turn red if there is a wake, a funeral, or some kind of event happening at the funeral home. With that, also within 200 feet of the intersection there at the end of Mountain Road and Wynn Street, there is 2 very popular and lively plazas directly on the opposite sides of each other on Mountain Road, where that's the entrance and exit. Again, any safety concerns with the issues of people there in the congestion and additional traffic just would not be in the best interest of Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you.
Marty, 1 second. Janice has been waiting. We're going to get to her first. Lynn, if you could go ahead and unmute her.
Go ahead, Janice, try it out. Oh, she's still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you, Select Board, for hearing me tonight. This is Janice Cohen, 8 Wilhelmina Ave, resident of Burlington since 1978. I have written an email to the board. I'm not going to read the whole email. I'm just going to highlight a few points so it will be on the record. Number one, that I think this is a poor location for this development for many of the reasons that I listed, as well as the most recent one being the traffic trying to get from Mountain Road onto Wynn Street is a nightmare. The affordability, the number of 40B units, a half a dozen is a drop in the bucket. Also, there are other locations in town that where senior housing could be built. Examples, the Housing Authority owns over 13 acres of land off of Adams Street on the Lexington line. Adjacent to the land owned by the Housing Authority is another 0.54 acres of land owned by the town of Burlington. Across the street of Adams Street, there is 4.55 acres of land owned by the town. There are additional smaller parcels of land owned by the town surrounding the land that I have already listed. I would like to see why the above parcels of land being discussed for senior housing, that these would be truly affordable units without the condo issues that Jack Kelly had mentioned. And if the town was seriously wanting to add more senior housing, I would like them to consider this land that is already owned by the town and the Housing Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Monty, you had your hand up. Come on down.
Good evening. My name is Monty Pearson. I'm a Precinct 3 town meeting member and a member of the Land Use Committee. And I would like to point out 3 things for you to consider in this project. The first is that I think that the major justification for placing this apartment building in anywhere in Burlington is the idea that we have a shortage of housing for seniors, and that this would address that issue. And I would like to suggest to you that this is a mirage, that the units are on the southern edge of Burlington, and that the developer cannot and will not be able to guarantee that a single person from Burlington will live in this apartment complex. And in fact, this apartment complex is right near Winchester and Lexington, where there will be lots of senior citizens who will be looking for apartments, condos that are near their town. And I would guess that there would be plenty of marketing going on in Lexington and Winchester. So the idea that this 24 units are going to be available for Burlington residents is not a reason to appoint this, because given what we know about the way in which condos are marketed, these could be marketed to people all over the region. So it's not necessarily that great a deal for Burlington. The second thing is that over the last decade or so, town meeting and the planning board and the land use committee have worked very hard to create what is called in general smart growth. And one aspect of that smart growth is to provide an increase in apartments, housing that is located in the commercial districts wrapped around the 2 highways that border Burlington. And that you'll notice that most of the apartment and new housing and new construction that goes on in town remains in that L-shaped area because it is close to the highway, it is close to shopping, it's close to other businesses. And that what you'll notice is that this apartment complex is not anywhere near any of those areas. It is outside of those areas, it is plopped into the middle of a residential neighborhood. And there may be some virtue in well, I don't think there's any virtue to doing that. I think that it really
Monty, so that you're over time.
I'm over time?
Yeah, I'm
Oh.
keeping everyone on the clock.
Oh,
You had a third
what is my clock? How much time?
I was giving everyone 2 minutes, we're at almost 3.
Okay.
But you had a third point, if you want to make it, go ahead.
Yes, I do have a third point. The third point is that because we have our over 10% housing, we, under Chapter 40B, are a safe harbor community. And that safe harbor community means that we do not have to accept any 40B proposal here in town. We have the right to say, we are over the 10% affordable housing limit, we do not need this piece of apartments. And so there is no need for us to spend a lot of time on this proposal. And I would recommend that this body send a letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals telling them that we have 10%, over 10% affordable housing, and we do not need an apartment complex like this. Because that's all they have to do.
Thank you, Monty. Okay, anybody else? Mr. Kelly, 1 second, let's make sure everyone's heard. Yes, in the back.
Hello, my name is Jessica Nedishin. I live on 65 Mountain Road, right across from Oxbow. I don't have any prepared statements, but I did just want to reiterate my concerns, particularly about the traffic issues. I have 2 small children who, ride their bikes. They walk on the sidewalk, if we had one. They walk, close to the edge of the street. The idea is that the amount of traffic and the level of reckless driving in this area is pretty severe. I do think that adding another 24 to 50 cars in the residential neighborhood sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. There's one stop sign and no lights at the end of the road. So I do feel like this is a poor, really planning issue, and that's really my biggest concern.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything new they'd like to add? And again, please keep it off of zoning topics, we get it. There are traffic concerns, there are other, that's the point of the comprehensive permit, should this come back to us. Mr. Kelly?
The issue of traffic getting out of Mountain Road onto Wynn Street was brought up. I don't remember how long ago, but there were lights proposed for that maybe a dozen or more years ago, but the town decided to put the pedestrian lights up by Sullivan's instead of at that location. Whether or not it's wise to put another set of lights that close, I don't know. That's something that should be discussed, but it was on the town's radar at one time.
Okay, thank you. Still is? Still is. It's been approved. Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair. Jennifer Goldsmith. I'm a resident of Richardson Road, Precinct 7, town meeting member, and also work for the town. And I just want to say thank you for giving me the time. I wrote a lengthy letter before I knew what exactly this was about, because this has been an ongoing issue for many years. I opposed it when it was going through Richardson. I have been listening to all of my surrounding neighbors, and it's very concerning of their concerns too. This is setting a precedent for other developers to go into other neighborhoods and put up condos and stuff like that when you have houses, townhomes. It's just setting a totally different precedent. So if you approve this by just saying, well, this isn't our purview to say if it's go or no, your word holds value. And I would hope that you would set a precedent for this town, that regular neighborhoods aren't going to have major condo complexes come in and disrupt things. So that's all I have to say in addition to what I already said earlier. But I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay. All right, Paul, Lisa, sorry, what?
May I say something?
Yeah, I was gonna turn it to
Okay,
all
you can
these.
do it.
Anybody
I
else
can
that
go
wants
after
to
that.
Add anything, and then we can come to the board for a second?
Yep.
Good. Paul, anything you want to add?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Murphy, anything that you've heard tonight that you want to speak on?
Not really, I mean, obviously, there's counterpoints to a lot that was said, but again, it's my opinion, this really isn't the time or the place to have those discussions, and,
Oh, sorry. If everyone could just speak a lot louder. For some reason, we're having sound issues tonight.
sorry, Mr. Chair, but I'm really not interested in getting into a give and take on all the points that were brought up. There were certainly counterpoints and counter-arguments that were what I thought was the right venue, that we could certainly have those discussions. What I'm, on behalf of my client, is focusing on is that this project, and it is 24 units, 6 of which will be affordable. It's age-restricted, directly meets a need that was identified by the report that came out in July of 2022, which the town commissioned. One of the specific concerns that were, when that committee, or the housing committee, went and got community input, one of the biggest concerns was that seniors, once they got to a certain point and they were no longer able or interested in maintaining a single-family home, there was not much available for them in this community, and they were forced to go elsewhere. That was a specific need that was identified. This project meets that need. Now, it's not a 100-unit complex, it's not gonna put 100 people, empty nesters into, but it chips away at that need. And that's what I believe this board's function is to come to a decision as to whether the housing provided by this proposed development is gonna meet a need in the town of Burlington. If it does, then on we go to the Board of Appeals, and I understand that people would prefer that it go to some other board, but the statute says it goes to the Board of Appeals, so that's where it goes. And we will have what I'm sure would be a very full and very healthy discussion about all of the items that were brought up here today. And the Board of Appeals, in conjunction with the various town departments and town boards, who I'm sure they will ask for their input, no doubt about it, they shape out those conditions and those concerns and try to resolve it. If not, they don't vote for it. If it is resolved, then they do vote for it. That's going to be a long process. Clearly, there's no doubt about it. But at those meetings, there'll be engineers, and there'll be architects, and there'll be peer reviews, and there'll be all sorts of things that have been talked about tonight. And people who know about that stuff a lot more than I do will have input into it as far as the grade of the slope of the driveway and the amount of drainage and the water runoff and how many trees. And those are all legitimate issues, and those will all be thoroughly discussed when it gets to that point. We certainly aren't prepared to have those discussions tonight, so that's why I don't feel any compunction to sit here and go down the list of some of the things points that were made here today. That time will come. I would just urge this board to, nothing has changed with respect to the nature of this project, other than the egress and the access. One thing that has changed from a housing standpoint is we have a July of 2022 report that we commissioned that confirmed that this meets a need. So I would say that that's a need that this board saw 2 or 3 or 4 years ago when the first letter was issued. That need has been reinforced by that housing report. And I would urge the board to reissue their letter of support so we can start down that process again. This does not, we don't walk out of here tonight if the board votes this at the next meeting, the shovels aren't in the ground the next day. This is going to be a long, long process. And this is just the small first step, but it's an important first step.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I know it's been a long meeting, and I just wanted to say a few things to reassure everyone. I first want to thank everyone who came to spoke tonight and all of your feedback, your emails. We see them all, we read them all. And we definitely, as a board, understand the weight of our letter of support. I want to reassure you that we do understand what that weight carries and how it works in the process. I'm very familiar with the area. I grew up at 16 Heritage Way in the Valley. Going to high school, my bus stop was Mountain Road, the intersection of Mountain Road and Mountain View Way. And I am not against, even if we are at the threshold for affordable housing and senior housing, I am definitely not against finding new places for it and new avenues to increase our stock in that area. And in fact, this is the exact type of development I'll be looking for in the very near future for my mother, who I'd love to move to Burlington in a retirement capacity. That said, I know for a fact, my mother would have no desire to drive up, as Mrs. Riley called it, even in an 8% grade Lombard Street to get up to this. She's very nervous driving in the winter, and she would have no desire to be anywhere for this. That's why I have strong reservation with using 35 Mountain Road as access for the project. I echo the concerns about getting onto Wynn Street from Mountain Road. It's terrible, and I'm honestly glad I don't live over there anymore, and I know I'm proud because it's very tough to get onto Wynn Road almost at any hour of the day. Just want to share my views with the board, and thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Other members of the board, if you want to say something, feel free. We still have discussion.
Well, we can't, in my understanding, we can't take a vote at this. At this
Sorry, yeah.
meeting, we can't take a vote on this until.
Come close to the microphone. Sorry.
Until we close the public hearing, and we would have to have a separate vote at a later date, probably our next selectmen's meeting. So,
Yes.
I do have one question, though, of council. At what point would we be negotiating with developers, should this move on to ZBA, for the development agreement to discuss terms of affordability and income eligibility and all other things that would be of interest to the Board of Selectmen? That's something that has to be done before we issue a letter of support to
yes.
PHCD?
That would be my recommendation. If you have a mind to talk about the affordability or enter into a development agreement, then you would do it now before you issued your letter of support, because you would want your letter of support contingent upon the accomplishment of those, whatever the items are. And then that would go together with their application to the ZBA.
Okay, I see.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Jim, anything? No? Okay. I'm bummed that we haven't heard from Housing Partnership, to be honest. I mean, Mike.
We've had we met with Tom and Gary and Jack 2 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. We had a good discussion for well over half an hour. A lot of questions that were asked and answered by the developers. The committee wanted to just listen in, and they're probably out there listening in to tonight's meeting just to get anything that they haven't already heard, if something new were to arise. And I would expect them to, we'll meet tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. I would expect them to have that discussion and send to this board a recommendation.
But if we close the public hearing tonight, can we receive that information?
Right, I guess that's it's an interesting point, and it also kind of goes to what Member Runyon said, and that is, if the board has an intention to have a conversation with the developer about a development agreement, that can certainly be separate from this public hearing process, because the public hearing process is an animal of the bylaw. But if you are going to receive comments from the Housing Partnership, you wouldn't want to close the public hearing until you receive those comments, right? So this is the same issue that was raised at the last meeting. So that's a problem.
The Partnership Committee is an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen.
Right, but you're receiving comments in a public hearing process on a project. I certainly understand what you're saying, Mr. Runyon, but even though this isn't, a statutory public hearing, it's a bylaw-driven public hearing, right? So if you're gonna receive public comment in the public hearing process, that has to come in while the public hearing is still open. The bylaw says that the board can't vote while the public hearing is open or on the same night the public hearing closes. So you would have to keep, if you're going to wait for the housing partnership comments, you would have to wait, you would have to receive those, and maybe that's all you do is receive those on the 23rd, close the public hearing, and then vote at your next meeting. Or you can just decide not to receive the public housing partnership comments.
Would the board, sorry, Mr. Murphy?
If I could just be heard on that, Mr. Chairman, if the board is going to consider their options that council just laid out. And without trying to be difficult, we agreed to continue it today, knowing that you have that 2-week period before you can actually vote this. And we made an effort to meet with the Housing Partnership. They requested us to, it was December 20th, which is 3 weeks. Well, it'll be 3 weeks, by tomorrow, it'll be 3 weeks. So from my standpoint and from my client's standpoint, if this board were to continue or keep the public hearing open until next meeting, as council just pointed out, then it's going to be 2 weeks after that before this board could actually vote on the matter. And, we've tried to be reasonable and work with them, but it seems to me, frankly, that if they could not arrange to have their comments submitted within 3 weeks, I think that was more than a reasonable enough time for the board to formulate whatever comments they might want to formulate.
Mr. Chair, if I could, with all due respect to Attorney Murphy, I would have anticipated that the applicant update its application for this board, put an official letter on if they intended that to happen. I could not recommend as your counsel to you to send a letter of support on an application that's out of date. So with all due respect to Mr. Murphy, you don't have an updated application in front of you for which to attach a letter, should you decide to go in that direction.
Right. And I was gonna, thank you, Lisa, for that. I was gonna ask that we do receive an updated application, but that doesn't need to happen while the public hearing is open, correct?
No, but it's the application that you're putting a letter on, right? So it would happen, I would say to you that you would want that application updated prior to the board voting to attach a letter to it.
Right, but if we close the public hearing tonight,
No, you can still make sure that there's an updated application.
right, because discussions can still take place before the vote on the 23rd.
Correct.
Right, okay. Okay, I saw some hands flying around. Mr. Pearson?
I couldn't hear you exactly, so I don't know exactly what you said. But I'd like to point out that because we are a safe harbor community, we have at any time in this process the right to say, we don't want you because we have 10%, and that would be the end of the process. And so I think that the developer isn't in a position to pressure this board to hurry through your decisions, because the developer, if he went to EOCD and went through the appeal process would say, well, those folks have 10% affordable housing, so you can't appeal this. That's how the regulations are put together.
I can assure you this board's not being pressured. Mr. Murphy's stating the case for his client, which I appreciate him doing on the client's behalf. Lisa's stating the case for us, and we're talking about it. No one's strong-arming anybody here.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say what the process is, because Mr. Pearson isn't exactly correct.
Okay.
The entity in the town that has a right to exercise safe harbor is the Zoning Board of Appeals, right? So any applicant can, even if a town is over 10%, can come to the Board of Appeals or file an application with MHFA and ask for a project eligibility letter. That project eligibility letter or the project letter from DHCD, if it's a friendly 40B, will say what the town's percentage is. It then goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals has 10 days from the date they open their public hearing to exercise or put the applicant on notice that the town has a safe harbor position. it is the Board of Appeals' authority under the regulations to exercise or not exercise safe harbor.
Thank you, Lisa. All set, Monty?
Yes. I just don't want I don't want us to be in a situation where, because that we have to hurry through this process because the attorney is inconvenienced.
Well, look, Monty, we're not hurrying through anything. You know, before town meeting implemented the bylaw, there was nothing, you know, it was just, hey, does the select board want to support this? And then everything fell to the Board of Appeals, should the state give it a thumbs up. So we as a town have instituted this new thing up front before this thing even gets accepted by the state, let alone the Board of Appeals having a crack at it, because we wanted more oversight and transparency, which I get and appreciate. That's why we're doing this. You know, in the process, I think that we are kind of, you know, dragging the proponent a little bit through the mud, you know, but, you know, that's my own personal take on it. So, you know, I mean, we can argue semantics all day, you know, but I think that we need to kind of keep this ball moving so that, you know, if the Board of Appeals wants to exercise safe harbor, that's, you know, that's the place to do it.
Well, but Attorney Murphy is arguing that you shouldn't listen to what the Housing Partnership has to say because he would like to move on to the next stage of the process.
He's doing his job for his client.
Okay, well, I'm objecting to him saying
You
that.
can object all you want as during the public hearing, it's fine.
Okay.
You know, noted, recorded, and on record. Sherry, come on down.
And Barbara's got her hand up too.
Oh, and Barbara, I see your hand now. Sorry, we'll go to you next.
Sorry, Barbara, thanks. Just a point of clarification information. So the letter of support that the board will or will not do is in support of a community project. That's my understanding of this type of project, that you would be supporting it for the community. And from what we've heard, and from what I've heard people responding letters, there hasn't been any support from the community. So I would like to hear from the board if you've received any letters or comments from people who are in support of this project. Thank you.
Yeah, we've received a handful of emails.
Could they be read into the record so that we could hear?
I don't have them in front of me, Sherry. They'll be included with the minutes, along with everything else that was submitted. You know, I mean, I will say that there have been more people not in favor of it than in favor of it. But then again, you know, we also have folks talking about it from very specific zoning standpoints, which I get and appreciate, right? You live in the area, you're concerned about traffic, you're concerned about safety, you're concerned about water runoff and flooding and what's gonna change it to your property. I get and appreciate that, you know, but those are things that need to be ironed out at the Board of Appeals, right? If we turn this into a planning board, you know, pre-Board of Appeals thing, we do the whole thing before they even submitted the application, you know, which seems to me the exact opposite of the point of this letter of support in general, right? Betsy. Oh, sorry, Betsy, one sec. I'm being so rude to Barbara. Barbara, you're next.
You're next.
Hi, can you hear me?
We got you.
We got you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a brief statement and then a question. My statement is just, I think it's really important for everyone who is interested in this project and concerned about this project to understand that we really cannot overstate the importance of the Select Board letter of support. I am not an expert in this, but I have been making inquiries, and it's my understanding that the letter of support from the Select Board carries tremendous weight with the state. So it is true that without it, the development could proceed, but it is far less likely to proceed without the support of the Select Board. And I just think everyone should understand that. My question is, can the Select Board ensure that any members of the Zoning Board of Appeals who will be working on this, who have business relationships with the developer, will recuse themselves?
Can we ensure that? I mean,
So that if there were a conflict of interest, Mr. Chair and members of the Select Board, that's a personal issue, can be only exercised by the person who has the conflict. The town can't require them, or this board can't require them. That would be a determination they would have to make for themselves.
Would it be, I'm sorry, may I ask Town Council a question? Can the Select Board require that anyone who has a conflict of interest or a business relationship with the developer are at least required to reveal that?
Mr. Chair, no, they can't. That's up to the Board of Appeals to abide by the conflict of interest law.
Okay, then I will just close by saying that causes me grave concern. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, something new?
First.
I'll be quick. Betsy Hughes, town meeting member from Precinct 7. I wasn't going to speak because everybody has been saying a lot of things that I was going to say, except for this is one item from Precinct 7 that I have heard so much about from my constituents. And there aren't a lot of things where it gets to that level. I do not live over in that part of Precinct 7. But it is one that people are very concerned about for all the reasons you've heard here. And also on the letter of support from the board, to Barbara's point, my understanding from other towns is that it does carry quite a bit of weight. So I would like, it feels like people are like, well, it's just a letter of support. It won't really make any difference. It will make a difference. And when you have a very large part of the town telling you that this is not the right place, they're not saying that we don't need housing, they're just saying this is not the right place for it. I would encourage you to please understand the weight that your letter will have, and not to support that, because your town is speaking to you, and I just want you to listen. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
I think I made the point in my letter, but I think it might be good for the public to hear this. My interpretation of what council said to this board at the last meeting is, you have every right to dig into the details of this. Her words were nitty-gritty. You can do that, but you're not obliged to do so. So by saying you don't want to hear zoning issues is saying to the town, you choose not to dig into the nitty-gritty when you have the right to do so. Instead, you would consider whether or not you're going to write a letter of support. If your vote is to not write a letter of support, then, fine, you don't need to dig into the nitty-gritty. But if your intention is to write a letter of support because the type of housing is needed in town, and it is filling a need, and your interpretation is that it's good for the community. So, it's your choice. You can dig in and find more information, ask the developer to give you that information, or you can just choose not to dig into it and kick it over to the Board of Appeals, which gets it halfway down the road.
Before I make comment, Lisa, is there anything you want to say to Mr. Kelly with regard to him quoting you?
Right, so I did say that at the last meeting, you have that latitude, but you can also, if you were to decide you were going to support it, you could also put those conditions or standards or whatever in your letter of support requiring further information and things of that nature.
Right, and please stop me if I'm incorrect in this, but when I heard her say that we can dig in, I meant I interpret that as from this point in the application to the state, and not by effectively becoming the Board of Appeals and running through the entire gamut of the project itself, right? So like, I'm staying here on this side of the line saying, yeah, tell me everything you can about the application that's gonna go to the state, but I'm not gonna infringe on the Board of Appeals' job in this case when it comes to the comprehensive permit.
Right.
So that's where I'm drawing the line there, Jack, because again, like, we don't need another planning board or another board of that level of oversight. That's why in this case it goes to the Board of Appeals, enacting that in that authority to then work with the necessary departments to gain the information that otherwise, during our typical process, would have received.
When lawyers speak, it can interpret a couple of different ways. The old joke is you get 6 lawyers and you get 12 opinions because, as Harry Truman said, I want a one-armed lawyer because they keep saying what they're saying, then say, on the other hand.
Right, and no one's happy with it. Ms. Rappaport, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair Priest. You made a good point about, you don't want to be the level of the planning board and having that amount of overview, but typically ZBA doesn't have that amount of overview that the planning board does. And Attorney Murphy made a point of saying that they had counterpoints, but this wasn't the venue. So what venue is it? Because if you want that letter of support, shouldn't we hear both sides of counterpoints? Because all we've heard is opposition to this project. Attorney Murphy and the proponent should give us the opposing side of, why should, give us some type of relief of the fears of the community that we're having. As representatives of the community, as the select board, that's your job, is to make sure that, we're ensuring that, we're relieving the fears and we're supporting a project that is beneficial for everyone involved and not just some folks. So, to mirror what Chair Cohen had said, I do think that we need to hear from the Housing Partnership. I would like to hear from Attorney Murphy on some of the major points that he feels, that he could offer some type of satisfaction and make the community feel a little bit better. Because I think right now all we've heard is negative, and we really haven't heard anything on a positive note. Thank you.
Yep.
I want to correct one statement. In a comprehensive permit process, we sit with the Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals actually does do a very detailed review. They hire peer review consultants, they hire traffic engineers, they hire civil engineers through the stormwater, architectural peer review. So we started to do that in the last round, but there became a different side issue that occurred. So this board, if you decide to go forward, can be assured that the Zoning Board of Appeals process would be very fulsome and detailed review, very similar to what a planning board typically does.
Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Rappaport, I hope that begins to answer your question, that essentially the venue is the Board of Appeals. Again, and I know that I'm not gonna go there, because people have made points about the weight of the letter, I get that. I'm just trying to also play devil's advocate and say that, should we not support it, it could still come back to us. Okay, anybody else?
Can I just say one more?
Sure.
Do I have to reintroduce?
No, you're fine.
I just want to say that the letter, back in February 2022, when this was at the Board of Appeals, it was continuously said, well, the Board of Selectmen and the Housing Partnership at the time, 2019, unanimously approved this, to get this to hopefully push past that process at the Board of Appeals. And the Board of Appeals, they did their thing. But this letter does hold, and this letter will come back, and we'll say, well, they unanimously, they approve this, or even if it's not unanimous, the board supports this. So it does come back, and if the community isn't for it, you guys are representing us.
Yeah, 100%, I don't disagree.
So I just wanted to make sure that this does come back. Literally just happened February 2022.
Sure.
With this same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I haven't made up my mind, but I would hope that the Board of Appeals would, not look at something like a traffic issue and go, meh, not a big deal. Select Board said, yeah, go for it, right? Like, that is their role, is to, dive into the nitty-gritty, right? And say, no, this isn't gonna work. We need this from the proponent, X, Y, Z. Can this move forward? No, okay. Yes, okay, right? Like, that's when all that happens. I would feel uncomfortable if people were using our letter, as a bargaining chip, essentially. But, that's out of my hands at that point, really, should a letter be submitted. Monty, go ahead.
I just want to point out, Mr. Chairman, that it isn't quite that easy because the members of the Board of Appeals are appointed by you gentlemen. And it is not the same as sending a letter to the planning board, which is a group of independently elected people. You're talking about people that you folks have appointed. And so I think that when you folks send them a letter saying, yeah, we think this is a good thing to do, then it has weight with them. And so it isn't just a sort of an okay. It's important to them because you're the folks who they answer to.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to defend the Board of Appeals here because I sat with them during the first time. The Board of Appeals essentially requested the applicant withdraw their application the last time because the Board of Appeals did a significant amount of work to understand the access issues. So the Board of Appeals acted independently and did the job that they were supposed to do at the last meeting. So I want to be really clear about that.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Monty. Brenda, is your hand still up? And then Mr. Cohen, I see your hand up as well.
No, I'm all set. And just for the record, I was on the ZBA when the initial application had come through, and we did do a significant amount of work. But being a former ZBA member and being a planning board member, and it's not to discount anyone's role, within serving the community. There was a lot of work done, in the original application. I see a little bit more. I see a different view from the planning board. And that's why I said, in my initial statement, the planning board's here to support the ZBA in any way, shape, or form that we possibly can, and have offered, our staff to assist them, as well. So, if this does go forward, we're here to support, whichever way we can. But I don't know that a letter of support is beneficial at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for awareness, I was on the Board of Appeals at one point when we had an earlier 40B, the corporate center development. And as a member of the Board of Appeals back then, I can tell you the process was very long, very thorough, very informative. It is a deep dive into the project. I served on the board during that. So.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Chairman Priest. I have refrained from commenting on my personal opinion. However, I just would like to make a very brief statement, and it's not intended to tell the select board how to do their job. But I really see two fundamental positions that the select board can take and how they make this decision from a leadership perspective. You can simply say that the board can take the position that the project satisfied a need in town and that you can reject any other information as a greater level of detail that should be handled by the zoning board of appeals. That's one. And I think, Mr. Priest, you've made that quite clear that that's one way of looking at it. The second way of looking at it is not that any one negative comment would essentially negate this project, that you should not send the thing. But when I was listening to it, just from my perspective, the sum total of all the negative concerns, I think, allows the board to consider whether the project of this type is better located in another location without all these negative circumstances. It's not to say that any one of these things cannot be at least partially mitigated. And not any one of these things maybe would not necessarily, could not be flushed out and resolved. But when you look at, when I was listening to all this and I'm listening to all the negative concerns, you could take the position that should you be deciding whether this kind of a project in this particular location is probably better off not doing it and putting it somewhere else. So I just thought I'd offer that, and it's not meant to tell you what to do, but it's just my personal opinion.
Thank you, Larry. Okay. Before we keep talking, a question for
and Paul, which is, we've got a meeting this Thursday, a strategic planning meeting. Can we leave the public hearing open for tomorrow to get Housing Partnerships notes and then close the public hearing on Thursday? As a formality, just leave it open so we can get the feedback, close it, and then that should still give us the 10 days to 23rd.
You only need 3 days, so you're good.
Oh, 3 days?
Yeah.
Okay,
You're good. Yeah, you could definitely do that.
okay. So essentially, like, they would respond via email, get us their thoughts, their remarks, and then, because we're already convening on Thursday, close the public hearing.
Thursday, you need to add it to the agenda on Thursday.
Right, and we still have time for that. And that way, on the 23rd, we can do final discussion. We can speak in public on what the Housing Partnerships thoughts were. That way, it's on public record, and then we can take a vote.
Yes, Mr. Chair, you can do that, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Mr. Kelly?
Lisa, is it they would only need to give 3 days' notice of to the continuation date of the public hearing?
The bylaw says which is not the same date as the public hearing, but which is not less than 3 days subsequent to the public hearing. So the 23rd is certainly more than 3 days subsequent to the close of the public hearing, which would be Thursday.
The bylaw aside, I'm talking notice to the public about the continuation date.
They can continue tonight till tomorrow if the meeting tomorrow were posted. So they can continue this
Is
tonight.
that sufficient
till-
notice of the continued date?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're not meeting until Thursday. Okay, all right, so if the board's open to that, so that we can get that, I mean, look, you know, we extended the public hearing the first time, even though we had already given the you know, required notice to all the boards and committees. You know, I'm pushing this out, you know, and we still don't have all the feedback, which is, to me personally, frustrating. You know, it's incumbent upon us if we're going to institute a bylaw that's going to force proponents into something that we want, then we need to be flexible in ensuring that, you know, we also adhere to, you know, seeking out that information. So, you know, I mean, I'd be willing to go so far as to do it to that. Mr. Murphy, I know Mr. Litchfield haven't spoke to you. Is there anything that,
No, I don't have a problem with that, Mr. Chairman. I'm under the understanding that you won't be taking any further testimony other than what you've been submitted by so I personally don't intend to be there. I can't be there. But as long as my understanding is correct, that there won't be further discussion that I may need to be a part of, then I have no problem with that. It keeps you on the same timeline as what we had intended coming into tonight.
correct? So my goal would be to basically walk into, convene, and then take the first agenda item, which would be to close the public hearing on the matter, so that we could at least have that window of time open between now and then to receive.
I think that's a good solution.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if there's any comment from the board on that, Mike?
Let me just kind of, before we do that.
Yeah.
It's very kind of confusing. All right. Every 40B I've ever sat in on, and every discussion through Housing Partnership with this board and so forth and so on, it's always, every single agreement has been for 80%, every single one of these units available for 80% of the area median income. I've asked numerous times to try and shuffle the deck, if you will, on something like that. So what I'd like you to consider and get back to us before Thursday is, what if we get 2 units at 80%, 2 units at 60%, and 2 units at 100% of area median income? So they're not all the same. They don't encompass all the same applicants. Now we've got a different group of applicants that would be eligible to.
2 at 80, 2 at 60, and what was the third one you said, Mike?
2 at 100, 2 at 80, 2 at 60.
I can discuss that with my client. And this came up earlier, the fact that there's no new proposal before you. Our understanding in coming into this from the state was that they literally said, just get an email from somebody saying the town was still okay with this. So whatever had been submitted 3 or 4 years ago with respect to backup and 80% and all of that type of stuff, the development agreement that was worked out, it was our understanding, at least my understanding coming into this, is that we were going forward on that same, the project proposal was the same, the details would be the same. The only thing that was going to change and that the state asked us to update was the pro forma and getting a new marketing survey, which we've done. I have no problem resubmitting a new application if that's what the state tells us to do. They haven't told us to do that yet. But if they do that, that's fine, and I have no problem getting some sort of a cover letter with some of the things that council mentioned for this board to look at, and to the degree that there has to be some sort of modification to the development agreement that was signed 3 or 4 years ago, I guess we can also look at that. But I'll talk to my client about breaking up the affordable components, as you've suggested.
Appreciate that.
I'll get you some sort of a response by Thursday. I'm not going to have a formal A to Z developers agreement, but we'll have to dig out whatever the old one was, and I can send you that over, and we can all review it. But I think we can certainly have something to you definitive by the time of your next meeting, when you would presumably be voting on this.
That's appreciated, Mr. Murphy, thank you. Okay, then, at this point, I will let, what did I miss? Does someone have their hand up? Brenda, Ms. Rappaport.
Undo R5. I needed Jim to give. Thank you. I'm sorry. One more comment. You had mentioned that, if we're going to be continuing this, you had mentioned that there were emails in support of this project. I think it would be really important for everyone to actually be able to either hear those or view those. So can you make those available for the next public hearing?
I mean, sure. Yeah, I mean, we can attach them to the backup, I guess.
Either that or read them into the record. Either way, whatever, whatever you prefer.
We got 1 or 2, to be perfectly honest, that I recall, that were just folks saying they were in support of it. They didn't necessarily list reasons why, but they were in support of it.
Was against drastically outweigh it, but I wanted to make note that there were a couple that I at least saw come through my inbox that was in support of it.
No, that would be great. If you can make those available with the dates that they were sent, that would be wonderful. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Website,
I mean,
on the town's website?
I don't know. I don't know what our access is to our particular page and how we do that, but
I mean,
we
I
can,
guess
we can work toward it.
We can adjust
We add to the
this
agenda for Thursday? Backup?
to you. I mean, we don't
We can put
typically
it on the
submit.
website, we can put it wherever.
All right, we'll find a way to make it available. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Do you wanna,
Can I
go ahead, throw a stick in my spokes, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention something to what Mike was talking about getting units at different price points for the affordability. These are condos, so when you have condos, I kind of ran into this myself because I moved into a condo where I never had been in one before, so there's some issues you may bump into that you don't as a homeowner, and one is that the affordable unit has a proportional share of the monthly fees, so that the other people who own the units actually are paying their share, the affordable share, because they're paying so much less. Assessments apparently don't work that way. So if there's any sort of special assessment, which we have, like if you have a big snow year and all of a sudden you've got a big bill and everybody's going to be assessed $5,000 per unit for that kind of stuff, the affordables have to pay that kind of big number. So when you're talking about how to make it affordable for the target audience I know you're trying to reach, you need to be thoughtful about that part of it, because that is different than the buy-in price. It's the ongoing price, and then the special assessment fees, which are there, especially in those kind of condos. So if we're trying to make it affordable, just think long-term for them, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Okay, so I am going to entertain a motion that we continue. Before we do that, I do want to take a moment, just, is it new?
I just wanted to say, if you're going to put the emails in public record that were for, could you please do all the emails you've received?
We will do all of the emails, all of the emails. I want to take a moment and just thank everybody for taking the time out of their evening and last month coming out and having this discussion. It's important that we have discussions openly, publicly. It's the whole point of this process. I also want to take a moment and thank the proponents and Mr. Murphy for taking the time and being our guinea pigs in this new process that we've instituted. It's not easy, and I'm sorry that you were the first ones. And, you know, hopefully next time it won't be as bumpy. Okay, so a motion to continue this to Thursday, the 12th. Our meeting starts at 5:30, so I would just say at or after 5:30. It's
So you need to date and time certain,
right, so 1:12,
5:30.
5:30.
Mr. Chairman, I make motion, we continue this hearing to Thursday, January 12th, on or after 5:30.
Second.
At 5:30.
At 5:30.
At 5:30.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? 4-0-0. Joe had to step out. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good
Thank you, Mr.
evening.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. We still got a couple more pieces of business to conduct, so the meeting is not over.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So while the room's clearing out, I'm going to go ahead and kick off item 18, it's discussion for the electronic sign policy draft. We received this from council as we look to prepare our presentation for town meeting on the 23rd. So, anything anybody want to add before I turn it to the board? Paul, Lisa, anybody? All right, we'll give it a minute. If folks could take their conversations out into the hall, that'd be appreciated. Folks, if we could take our conversations to the hallway, please. We still have a few more things to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the first draft of the policy that town council helped us out with, so we put it on here. So we did receive a little bit of feedback from some members when it was emailed out, but anything you'd like to add to it, we'll bring it back at a future meeting for, once we get initial comments, we'll try to make some adjustments and bring it back to you, and then, we'll be ready to go. We'll be well on our way to having a policy in place in the event town meeting approves that zoning bylaw.
Awesome. Lisa, anything you want to add to this?
No, I don't. We've worked, it's not unfamiliar to you. A lot of the language is like the flagpole kind of thing, because you don't want it to be a public forum. I will say paragraph 13, you don't need, it's the security issue that is a hangover. But other than that, that's why it's going to look familiar to you, is that it's much like the public forum for the flagpole.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions or comments from the board at this time? I know I personally gave it a read, didn't have anything on my first read that I wanted to initially, drag out, but we had a lot going on tonight, so I'm probably gonna sit with it, at least to we'll probably wait until February to bring this back up, to be honest. Got a lot going on the 23rd, but any comments?
I just had hope to see something mentioned, public safety or public health emergency type language in there to give it a little extra oomph if anybody's waffling.
Yeah, maybe in that, like, the list of possible uses.
Right at the get-go,
Right at the top, right at the jump.
To be honest with you, yeah.
Go big or go home. Jimmy, you wanted to say something?
Otherwise,
No,
I think it's
I read
fine.
it. It looks pretty good, so.
Okay. Mike?
I did review it, I have no issue at this point.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
Very good. All right, so we'll go ahead and move that to February for further discussion. If in the meantime you read it a second time, third time, and you have comments, get them to the staff, and we'll deal with it then. All right, 19, approval warrant articles for January. What's going on, you, John? Paul? Who's got it?
John, take.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think everybody has a list of the articles for this upcoming town meeting in front of them. I had also shared an email with the backup and the warrant, and then sort of a summary of the articles. I think what we've done in the past is sort of given a quick review of all of them, and then hold anyone they want to deeper dive on. We could do that same thing, whatever the chair wishes.
Yeah, let's just walk through them and see if anybody wants to talk about it. Lisa, just out loud, I want to thank you for your time tonight. I know you're heading out. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, we just have one zoning bylaw article, and it's the changing of zoning for the Burlington signage regulations. This was submitted by the select board, who have talked about it before. There was a memo from Paul in the backup that everybody has seen before today. You want to take them by topic, or?
You guys want to take them, just vote on them one by one so we have the, no, let's talk through them and we can hold for discussion and then do a batch vote. Go ahead.
Next financial articles, of which there are 9. The first few are annual articles that come every January. You replenish to the reserve fund. There's a memo in the backup from Whitney Haskell. We approve the budget at May town meeting for whatever that budget number is. We come back at January because free cash has been certified, and we replenish, or if we haven't spent any, we add another $100,000 to that budget to get us through if anything goes on till May. If I'm talking too fast, just let me know. Article 4 is transfer the free cash to stabilization fund. This is the $230,000 that was appropriated at September town meeting to cover 2 projects that came up at September, which we, at that point, don't have free cash certified, so we have to use other sources. What we've done the last couple of years is to use stabilization and then come back in January and put the money back. So that's a similar thing. There's a memo from Treasurer Giannino in there requesting same. Article 5 is an annual article we see every January. A memo in the backup from Whitney Haskell, Budget Director. This one you've seen since we started the MWRA, our plan to join the MWRA. There was a plan to raise rates over 10 years, and this is the mechanism of how we capture those rates that were raised. We put them in the stabilization fund in January. We come back in May, we ask for them when we approve the budget. The next 3 are contracts or compensation plans. Article 6 is the BMEA. All 3 of these plans will sound familiar. They have the same sort of wage increase modeling that we did with the units that have already ratified their contract, which is the 2 police units and the fire unit we did before. So the BMEA, as I said, is similar. There's the union and the town have come to a collective bargaining agreement for 3 years that will cover this current year and the next 2. The finances are similar to those in the other units, which is 2.5% increase each year with some small increases, small adjustments to the spread between steps. And this also includes an increase in the education reimbursement line. There was the non-financial piece, there were some clarifications around vacation, holiday, overtime language. It also incorporates the cyber security like we have in the others. It's important to point out for these 3 articles that they are not an actual increase in the budget. They're just a transfer from the negotiated settlements line that already exists in the budget. Article 7 is very similar to DPW contract. Same thing, coming from the negotiated settlement. Same thing, 3-year deal for this year and the next 2 years. Financial terms very similar to 2.5% in year 1 and 2, 2.25% in year 3. Similar with the adjustments between the spreads, and 2 small increases in both the on-call rate for water and sewer folks and for the tool stipend. There's same clarifications of vacation, holiday, and overtime. Also includes the cybersecurity policy. Again, transfer from negotiated settlement, not an increase in the budget. Article 8 is not technically a union. It's the Administrative Professional Compensation Plan. Although it's not a union, this group does collectively bargain their compensation plan. This is for all employees that are non-union and work more than 20 hours a week are covered by this plan. This is a 2% increase with the same small adjustments between the spreads between steps. Article 9 is a cybersecurity assessment. You'll see there was a memo from Mr. Kuhner describe the services that we'll be procuring. Hopefully you read that memo because I'll do a lousy job explaining it. But it's basically so we can hire a third party to check our vulnerability and work with department heads on exactly what this department-specific plan will be. This is going to be for both school and town. There's quite a lot of work done by Bob Cuna and Jose and his team. Article 10 says 5-year municipal solid waste collection disposal contract. Important to note that this actually isn't approving the contract, that this is just giving the approval for us to enter into a contract longer than 3 years, which is required by Mass General Law. You'll see a memo in there back up from Mr. Sanchez. And Article 12 is, again, an annual article you see in January. This one is kind of the funny one where we get money from the state based on an assessment to rideshare that either end or originate in Burlington. The state charges a fee of 20 cents. They split that with the municipalities. We get, so it's, $14,830. And what our plan is, same as last year, to use this to help offset the cost of our rideshare program, our local transportation program. Moving on to general articles, there were two, and I understand one is going to be withdrawn. So Article 12 is just acquisition of the land by donation on Peach Orchard Road. And Mr. Chairman, do you want to discuss the general bylaw articles? Do you get any feedback about whether the board would like to take a position on any of those? There was a letter in the warrant from town council talking about Articles 14 through 18 and issues that she had with them. And the last one, Article 19, is an increase in the fees for water usage during a ban.
Right.
So, sorry for talking so fast, but we've covered these before, so I just wanted to.
No, it's perfectly fine. I mean, we can easily take 2 through 12. What's the board's feeling on 14 through 19?
Do we typically take position on those?
Not always, unless it's something that the board sees as related to the type of work we do here on the select board.
This is mostly town meeting
Right.
stuff,
So like 19, we want to consider taking a vote on because it deals with the water fines, right? But beyond that, probably let the rest go to town meeting.
I would think so.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's, if there's any further discussion, please stop me. But otherwise, let's do it in two motions, 2 through 12 and then 19.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve warrant articles 2 through 12 for the January town meeting.
Second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? 400.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve Article 19 for the January town meeting.
Second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? 400. All right, Mr. Denizio, I think that covers us there. Okay, we got minutes from November 14th, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from November 14th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? 400 for the minutes. Okay, subcommittee reports. Who wants to go?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I know we all want to go.
Well, about subcommittee reports.
You're gonna skip, go to him.
No, you know what, I wanted to make a note of this, because I think it's kind of important. But I was watching Governor Baker exit the State House the other day in on his last day, and I just couldn't help but think about how well Burlington fared during the 8 years of the Baker administration. I mean, the governor himself, his transportation secretaries, his economic development people, they were regular visitors here to Burlington, and they almost always write a check with them as well. And I asked Paul if he thought maybe they haven't tried to put a number on it, and it was almost impossible to put an exact figure on how much money we received during the governor's 8 years, but it was well into the tens of millions of dollars that we received when we were there. So Burlington certainly has gotten the attention of the state. I think we will continue to do so as we continue to grow and improve here in town. But anyway, I just wanted to say thanks to the governor. I thought he did a heck of a job, and Burlington was benefited during his administration. And thank you again.
I agree. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to briefly say today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and thank you to our fine police department, the men and women who serve. We're very grateful for all of their efforts and all the things they do to keep us safe and keep us rocking and rolling here in Burlington. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, item 22, Chairman's Report. This is our first meeting post the holidays. I hope everyone had a nice, safe holiday. Happy New Year, 2023. We're getting up there. I saw, just anecdotally, I saw a fact online that anyone born this year has a very high likelihood of seeing the year 2100, which is just mind-boggling, right? And I started doing the math on my kids, and they should all, hopefully, God willing, see the year 2100, which is, again, still mind-boggling that, kids under 10 essentially have a very good chance of seeing that date. With the new year comes things like colder weather. We've been very fortunate thus far, but I say it quite often during this season, please check on your neighbors, especially your elderly neighbors. As the temperatures begin to drop, pipes freeze, especially with the rising cost of things, people scale back on how, warm they keep their homes. That's when accidents happen. So, we're a community, we keep an eye on each other, please do that. And then in that vein, on my soapbox, every meeting, we need volunteers for things. So please, go online, grab the application form, fill it out. Interested, not interested, whatever it is you feel like you want to do, an hour a week, 3 hours a month, whatever it winds up being.
4 hours a night.
4 hours a night.
People who run for this.
Yeah, planning board, we're coming for you. No, we're not really, I promise. But no, just, if you can give of yourself, we appreciate it as a town government and in a community. Paul, Town Administrator's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief as always. I know that the board received notification that the town, through the efforts of the Public Works Department, received another Green Communities grant for weatherization of the Town Hall and the Town Hall Annex, $129,000. And one of the ones what you didn't get notice on was also from our Public Works Department through the efforts of Rachel Leonardo and her team. But we did receive a grant from the Department of Environmental Protection of $177,805 to put solar panels on the Mill Pond water treatment plant. So we estimate that once those are in place, we'll save approximately $18,000 to $20,000 a year on electricity costs just for that facility. So it's the biggest electricity user that we have here in town, with the exception of maybe the Ice Palace. So
That's great news.
yeah, so
Awesome news.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. I'm gonna put the gavel preemptively. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, 4-0-0. Good night, everybody.